Thank you so much, Coach Harris, for joining me today for the WaveCapital guest speaker series on relationship building in a team environment. And you're my guest today. And thank you so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Garrett.
You're very welcome, Coach Harris. And could you provide me your definition of team building? What does team building and relationship building specifically mean to you?
Well, let me start by saying I actually have written on this and spoken on it quite a bit in the business world context, but using my sports background. So let me start off real quick. This may take a minute, but
sure, go
ahead.
Good
question. I wrote this book, On Point, 4 Steps to Better Life Teams, about 8 years ago. It's still on Google. It's not hot anymore, but it served the purpose. I got my message out and did a lot of speaking on it, but it combines sports stories and also with biblical references. And whether you're an individual or a business, the principles apply to varying degrees as they lead to relationships. And so it's up to any individual company to make their applications. But to start, I think too much emphasis has been paid to leadership. You know, there's been so many books and articles and speeches and everything written on leadership. But if everyone's pushing to be the leader, you're not going to have much of a team. So in the book, we emphasize being of influence over leadership. It notes how to increase one's influence quotient, your IQ, a little different kind of IQ. But you need influencers in different areas on your team. In basketball, you need a leader in the locker room, one for offense, one for defense, one in practice who just sets the tone. In business, it may be this department, that department, or area, and so forth. Leadership then develops as the influencers, you know, get a little better and know how to, and just take their role and live with it. And you get leadership to develop actually then without it being obtrusive and in a less competitive way. So, well, how, Del? You know, that's one thing to say it how. Well, briefly, individually or corporately, you first of all, number one, develop a purpose or mission for yourself or your family or your business or other organization, whatever your team in life is we're talking about. And sometimes it's called living intentionally. Well, second, you must develop and demonstrate, show caring. You gotta, I say, do caring. Unless you invest in others and show that you're ready to help them, then the rest of the points I have, 3 and 4, won't matter much, because you're not going to get very far if you can't show that you are investing and you're caring about the people that you're, you know, hoping to lead. Then you must be willing, number 3, to be a mentor. Everybody wants to get better at whatever it is they're doing. Look at Tiger Woods. He was the best, but if he failed to get better at any given time, he would change coaches. And so it's that way in life. I think everybody prefers to get better. So if you're in any influential position at all above somebody, then if you will, and particularly where performance matters, you know, on the court and in the workplace, if you can assist, correct, mentor, cover for somebody, you know, help them along, this will draw that person to you. You will become influential with that person. And even if it's a competitor and your encouragement and help him gets him ahead of you in the order on the team or in the business, well, at least you know you have somebody ahead of you now that likes you, that cares about you because you cared about them. And then fourth, you need to develop an aura of encouragement about you and in your interactions with people. Now, some people say, well, you just got to be positive about everything. No, everything isn't okay. You've got to be correct errors, mistakes, obvious ones. You still have to be a mentor, but under control. And then, you can't laud half efforts, for example. But overall, you're still on that encouraging, positive lane. Now, what will happen is amazing if you do these things. You live with purpose, demonstrate caring, be willing to mentor, and have that aura of encouragement. What will happen is what I call a cycle of fulfillment. And that is this, that when you do those things, the persons you do this with will develop a trust in you. How can you not trust someone who's always there to help you and encourage you? And then in time, trust on steroids becomes loyalty. And where there is loyalty, what will happen next is affection or even love in particular relationships, but affection. And where there is affection, when this happens, that's the basis for unity. And unity has another name, relationships. So the irony here is it can happen person to person, or person to product, or person to a service or a service business. Say, for example, you begin to trust and be loyal to, like, I'm loyal to Lexuses. I've had over the last 30 years, I've had 19 of them. So I like them, I'm affectionate for them. And so what you're going to have when you do these things is a longtime friend or customer, a relationship. So that's my line.
Well, Coach, I think that was pretty awesome, the way that you were just able to explain all that to me and our audience, who really looked to you and who have admired the NBA for so many years, being fans of the sport, the coaches who have coached, the players who have played, the organizations, being able to put teams and players and coaches in the position to succeed. And you talking about unity, and you talking about trust and loyalty, and talking about how you have to really put yourself out there. If you are a leader and you recognize the strengths and weaknesses of your teammates, knowing how to bring the best out of them to compete every day, every night on the basketball court. And you're right about outside of professional sports and other professional walks of life, depending on the company you work for or an organization you work for, it doesn't have to necessarily be sports related, but you can take so many life lessons that you're imparting here today, and the books that you've written discussing those elements of what it takes to have great life teams, as you illustrated in your book. When you think of, you talked about your son being assistant general manager for the Golden State Warriors, and I'm sure you've been a mentor to him. Maybe talk to me about your father and son relationship with your son, and maybe talk about, some of the teams that you've coached. You led the 1981 Houston Rockets to the NBA Finals against the Boston Celtics. I'm sure, on that team that you took to the NBA Finals and other teams, talk to me about some of the players, you've coached. We'll talk about Kobe Bryant later on in the broadcast, but maybe talk about just other people, coaches or teammates on your teams that you really felt affected you in a positive way, and that really made a good impact on you?
I wouldn't know where to start, Garrett. I always tried to coach in such a way that 10 years later or whatever, we'd still be friends, and I didn't bat 100%, but I had a pretty good percentage. And
Sure.
I have so many guys that I coached, even going back to high school and college, as well as each team that I was with in the NBA, Rockets, Bucks, Lakers, Mavericks. Well, even spent a year with Chicago Bulls, and for that matter, and Derrick Rose and Joe Noah became very good friends to me. In those times, I've been fortunate to have worked with, I don't know, 15 or 17 Naismith Hall of Fame players. And, you don't get to be that unless you have character, work ethic, along with the skill. I mean, every player in the NBA, every player, the last guy on the roster is very skilled. There's no bad players. If you ever stepped on a court for a minute, you were a very good player. I have the highest regard for those kinds of players. And in fact, the last 13 years, I've been working with the Mavericks Development League team, the Texas Legends. And I've seen the Development League, now called the G League, just grow exponentially. Used to, players would go to Europe if they didn't get an NBA contract, because that was where the money was. But now they play in the Development League because maybe the money immediately isn't as big as it might be to go to China or Spain or somewhere. But the opportunities are so much better in the G League.
Well, I think that it's wonderful that you have, the Development League, and you have the G League as well, and that you see players who they have different maturation. They have different maturation journeys in terms of becoming, professional basketball players, whether they play in the NBA or overseas in Europe or in other leagues. And eventually they do, get to their peaks. But, like any competitor, like any athlete, if you work hard at something with the skills that you have and the drive that you have, and I think the determination, perseverance, it all comes into play. It's having the skills, but also having, the God-given talent to compete. And you're exactly right. Nobody ever thinks about, at times, the role players, the ones who come off the bench. But, when they give good minutes and they can score points, or they can do other things like rebound the ball, assist the ball, play defense, it all comes into play to become a successful organization and to make a difference on those championship teams. And so I think about, in your case, I mean, you've been recognized, by the Basketball Hall of Fame. You've been recognized as an NBA Coach of the Year. Talk about, some of the accolades that you are most proud of. What are ones that really stand out to you?
I really don't much want to talk about those kinds of things. When you get these awards and things at my age, I'm 84, it just means you're old and you've been around. But I'd rather talk about the players and such. I just was blessed with being with, I won't say I coached them, I at least I didn't prevent them from being Hall of Famers. But starting with, I mean, I could go back to the college and high school times of how those players helped me along. I wouldn't have gone from, I started out coaching junior high, then high school, then small college, and in Puerto Rico before I ever coached in the NBA. So there was a stair step, and I got help all along the way. But Moses Malone was probably the biggest key factor in my longevity of being in the NBA, which we started with him in the ABA, thanks to Tom Nasulke bringing me there as assistant coach after we had coached against one another in Puerto Rico. And then the next year we were with the Houston Rockets, and we made a trade to get Moses from Buffalo at that time. The NBA was no longer. And with Moses, I had him 6 years as assistant coach or head coach, and he made MVP twice. We went to the Final Four twice, the finals once. And he just, if I hadn't been with Moses, rest in peace, wonderful man, for those years, there's no way I could have still be working for an NBA organization all these years later, since 1975. And so along the way, then there were other, Hall of Famers like, Calvin Murphy and Rudy Tomjanovich on that same team, and Sidney and Jack at Milwaukee, and then Shaq and Kobe, and there may be more that I had at the Lakers and so forth. So, and yet you make a great point, Garrett, and that's what really made me want to come back. There are about 500 players in the NBA. Now, 450 of them, more or less, are role players. And you, in my book, I honor the role player in life, and I really think that's overlooked a lot of times. But there are only, again, I don't know, let's say there may be 50 players in the league that you could put in the top 50. Obviously there are 50. Your list might be different than mine, but at any rate, what makes for championship teams, though, is whether those key players, those all around can do it all type players, can get enough role players around them that are happy in their role and really contribute greatly in various ways to make for championship teams. So, when you're looking to hire somebody, you're probably not looking to hire the CEO. So you're looking to hire somebody that's going to be a role player, and then hopefully, or draft one. You're not going to draft normally the guy that's going to be your best player the very next year. It happens. I know that. It's happened before, but you're not going to get many of those. Those go first or second. And go to a poor team, somebody finished last. But anyway, it's these role players that do develop and so forth. And we see that from the development league, the G League, and we see it on teams, second round draft picks and stuff that really become a central figure.
Well, I mean, it's just, amazing that, again, talking about the role players, and it's so refreshing that you highlight them in your book, and that, you recognize them, because, everybody should be accounted for on a team. Everybody's skills, everybody's passions, everybody's, abilities to make a team whole and to make them competitive. And there's just so much love for the game of basketball. I'm a big, fan, and I've personally met Michael Jordan. He always had the love for the game of basketball. He still does, even years after he's retired. You have players, like Kobe or like Shaq, players, who you've mentioned, like Moses Malone, or coaches like Rudy Tomjanovich, who two-time NBA champion and head coach of the Houston Rockets. And one of my friends I go back 8 years with, Kevin Willis, who you coached in Dallas as an assistant coach when he was with the Mavericks briefly.
Yes.
And Kevin has always been a star player. He was able, whether he was a starter or a role player. And, he scored, he rebounded, he assisted, a guy that you would want on your team to make you feel like, feel good, and did his job, and I just think of all the other players, and coaches who I've met, and, they all have a place in, basketball history. And for you to talk about, and highlight some of the players that really, impacted, I think, your coaching career. I think it's really speaks to the longevity you've had in the NBA, but it also speaks to, your credibility as a beacon for the sport and how much you've done for it. I mean, I think that, I know that you don't, focus on the accolades as much, but I mean, to win the, award named after Chuck Daly, I think that's truly remarkable. Or John Bunn, I think that's, truly remarkable. And talking about, your relationship with Kobe Bryant, who has since passed, but you were his first NBA coach. Could you talk to me about that experience? What was it like to coach, an 18-year-old, Kobe Bryant?
Well, it's an honor to have been associated with him. I coached his dad. So the first time I ever met Kobe, he was 4 years old. So people ask me, what was your first impression of Kobe? Well, I thought he was really cute. But that's not what they were talking about, of course. Right. He's 4 years old. But, well, I obviously wish that I could have been with him more than just when he was 18 and 19. He was 17 the day we drafted him. But he became such a wonderful player. And then as he developed personally and in team ways and so forth, he just became one of the great players ever. And it's a shame that his life was cut so short, because he had already set up things to where I think he was going to be even more effective in life, helping those who need help and guidance in their lives, particularly the young people. But it was cut short, but I think he would have done more for society than he did, even as the wonderful player that he was. And but anyway, you talk about work ethic. Almost all the guys that become great, and all of them that I know of, had a great work ethic. And but it was, you take the great skill that he had and combine that with intense purpose. You talk about a player having a mission and then sticking to it. He did that from day one. And he's obviously a great role player for any kid to look up to try, used to say, be like Mike, and yeah. Kobe wanted to be like Mike, and
he did.
And now you can say, be like Kobe, and because he learned to be a good team player and help his teammates along. I mean, at first, of course, he was just intense on trying to get more playing time. He came to a team that was already a big winner and was young. We didn't have to put him in. his second year, he only started one game. Now, I averaged 15 points a game, or third leading scorer on the team, but he still had to, correct some things and work his way in. But he was voted second in the Sixth Man of the Year award as a 19-year-old kid, and still not quite fully developed physically. Unlike when LeBron came in with his mammoth body, Kobe was slight by comparison as an 18-year-old, and got a little bigger as a 19-year-old, and then it got even better and better. But anyway, it was good for him to be on a team, though, that didn't need him, because it made him, and he said this later on, that it made him refine his game. Because the first year that we had Kobe, we won 56 games, and the second year I had him, we won 61. And Shaq missed a total of 53 games in those 2 years, and we still won 56-61. And that's why Kobe filled such a big role as sixth man. I'd always had a good sixth man. I had Ricky Pierce was one of the best sixth man ever, and then before that, Calvin Murphy. And I think it's a key role. The John Havlicek role. That to me, it's an integral part. And again, that's a role on the team. It's important.
Well, I totally agree. I totally respect every role that every NBA player has, and any sport that I've admired, whether it's the NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball. And you talk about the dominance that Kobe had, and you talk about how his career really blossomed under you, and then it set himself up for the rest of his Hall of Fame career. And I work with my father at my company, and you talk about your son being in the business, or I mentioned it to you being the assistant GM of Golden State Warriors. And I think about when I met Bill Walton a little over a decade ago, and I even mentioned to him about what it was like to have his son play for the Lakers, and he was just very prideful. I remember him telling me how prideful he was. Or when I worked at ESPN, I met a gentleman, Chris Ramsey, who worked at ESPN. His father was Dr. Jack Ramsey, who took the Portland Trailblazers and the Bill Walton team and won an NBA title. So I think about the players I've met and the roles that they've had, and how their families, or how other family members, whatever business they were in, played an integral role and having that special bond. So could you talk to me a little bit about what it means that your son's in a business, and your relationship with him, and being in the very important position he's with the Warriors? What does that mean to you?
Well, of course, I'm proud of him. I have 5 children, and I'm proud of each of them, and they're all outstanding in different ways. I have 4 sons and a daughter, and they all played college basketball. And my daughter, for example, played at Marquette, and the boys were all either D2 or D1, and all of them have done something in basketball as far as coaching or teaching kids, besides Larry. And Larry's been in the league now 34 years. I hired him initially as a scout and IT guy way back in the 80s, when the computerization of things just started, and he had graduated with a degree and played 4 years and graduated with a degree in math and computer science back in the 80s. So that's done well for him over the years in the NBA. His son is also working in the NBA, my grandson, with the Washington Wizards Development League team. And my youngest son Dominic out in Los Angeles teaches basketball to kids and is doing a great job. And he's actually wanting to move up into the G League whenever that can happen for him. And so each of them just are wonderful. I've been incredibly blessed with 5 very successful and wonderful kids.
Well, I'm sure it makes you very, very proud, and to be able to speak so, highly and well of your children who have accomplished so much, and I'm sure have made you proud, and to see them blossom into the professionals they become and to be a part of the NBA in some way, shape, or form. And, I think, with what we see in the world today, and, nothing should replace the strength of a family. I know times have changed, and I know that, the family structure in some respects is not as strong as it used to be. But I think that, with good old family values that I grew up with as well, I'm glad to see that, people, can grow and learn and look to their parents, or look to their, in your case, look to you as a father, and think back to all the wonderful memories that he or she have, your children, and seeing what you've done for this sport and how selfless, you've been, and how you've molded players, and how you've impacted, other coaches as well, and how they've impacted you. And I think that, to have that special bond that you have with your children is truly amazing. And I think also about things that you've done outside of sports, and you did, and I know this is, something that I feel is something worth mentioning, because it became one of the highest grossing basketball movies of all times, the original Space Jam. And you made an appearance in Space Jam. Could you tell me how that all materialized? And I'm sure your kids being a younger age, they probably thought it was pretty cool that you could be featured in the same movie as Michael Jordan and the Looney Tunes squad. So maybe you can tell me a little bit about how that all materialized for you.
Yeah, that's a good one. I should have also mentioned Stan, Alex, and Carrie. I mentioned Larry. And,
oh, sure.
And
your children.
all just done well, my children.
Absolutely.
Dominic. But yeah, I'll tell you, Garrett, at my age, when I go to basketball camps, which I do for the Texas Legends every summer, Spud Webb and I do Mondays, and Spud does Wednesdays at these Legends kiddies camps, and they don't know who I am, some white-haired guy. But when I tell them that I was Kobe's first coach and Magic's last coach, and I was in Space Jam, well, now I'm all right. And because I will tell you, it's just amazing. We did that movie in '96, and I was coaching the Lakers. And so every quarter since 1996, I've gotten a check from Warner Brothers for starring along with Michael and Bugs Bunny. I'm in the scene early. What happened? The space aliens took over Barkley and Ewing's body in New York, and then we had to play the next night in LA, and my players don't want to risk playing because there's bugs out there, according to Cedric Ceballos, who, by the way, Cedric is struggling with COVID right now. And
I hope he feels better. I'm praying for him.
He's had a serious case. So wonderful man too. But anyway, Vlade doesn't want to go. None of them want to go. So they don't go into the locker room. They put on gas masks and go out on the court. So that's how people will remember my scene. They don't remember me, but they remember the gas masks.
I know. And I remember you were saying in the movie, you're talking about a huge fine here.
Huge fine. Yeah.
I just remember. And yeah, that really resonated with me. And you're a part of basketball movie history. And I wanted to, you brought up Magic Johnson, and before we depart from our interview, you had mentioned Magic being your last, or you being Magic's last coach, rather. What was that like to be able to coach Magic Johnson and all the adversity he had to face and coming back into playing shape, playing in the NBA after being, out of the game for about a few years?
Well, I will tell you, I've never even told this one before, other than to, my inner circle. I mean, I've never said it publicly, but I had so much regard for Magic. I coached against him, his entire career. But I got to know him. Sometimes there are players you coach against, you get to know them, and a lot of them you don't. But I talked to him different times, one-to-one. And when he was diagnosed with the HIV, and then he dropped out of playing, I also quit coaching shortly thereafter at the Milwaukee Bucks, where I was head coach and general manager, and just became general manager. I turned it over to the late Frank Hamblin, great friend, assistant coach, and I just became general manager the rest of that year. The last two games I coached for the Bucks was against Jack Ramsey at Indiana and the Lakers minus Magic. We won both games by 20, 25 points. That's the last games I coached for the Bucks, but there were just problems. There was Magic, and there was the Gulf War, and there was an operation I had that didn't go great. So I quit. And to have a chance to actually coach him, and I will tell you, he played great. He came in knowing he wasn't going to be the point guard, because by then he weighed 265, 6'9", and I needed a bigger guy to go with the young team I had. I had Eddie Jones and Nick Van Exel in the backcourt, and they were terrific. We won big with both of them, and both of them made the All-Star team. And anyway, we got Magic in there in late January, early February. Anyway, you can go to YouTube and Google in Magic's final season, the games, and you can see it's not the whole game. You've got the highlights of Magic. I want to tell you, it's some of the best basketball you're going to see. He made some three-pointers and stuff, but he would get inside, and he had the right hook, the left hook, and then those passes behind his back and over his shoulder, and I mean, no looks. And on the break, he was still Magic. Oh, I tell you, it was terrific. And last thing, the day he practiced, the first practice, and it was known that he was coming back, going to be the first practice, it was at LMU, on the campus there in Los Angeles, and LMU University. We had cameras to beaming back to Asia and Europe, and it was like an NBA playoff game, but not a first round. It was like, you know, at least the Western Conference Finals. I mean, it was, as a former president used to say, huge. It was an event.
Well, I wish I could have been there to experience it. I definitely will go on YouTube to look at his highlights, and I enjoy looking at a lot of, you know, former players' highlights, from Magic to Michael to Larry, guys like David Robinson, or, you know, guys like Shaq and Kobe, Karl Malone, Stockton. I mean, you know, I grew up with late 80s and all throughout 90s, early 2000s basketball. And, you know, those Lakers teams that you coached were legendary type of players. And, you know, you're a winner, Coach. You've proven to be a winner time and time again. And your leadership skills and your coaching skills and your ability to make an impact on everybody you come across really resonates to this day. And you're an icon, and the fact that you were able to be in a position to, you know, coach and to mentor and to teach, and you're full of history. And I'm so glad that we can document this, and I'm so glad that you're here today. And I'm just really proud of this moment to be interviewing you, and I really thank you so much for your time.
Well, full of history. That's a compliment. I've been called worse. But well, I need you to be my publicity director, I think. But I'm the dash at LA between Riley and Jackson. But I was proud to be there, and it's kind of a signal thing that. You know, when you've been the coach of the Lakers, it just kind of is different. And you know, I'm always, you know, just glad to have been a part of it.
Well,
of all of them, for that matter. I mean, not to take away from, certainly from Houston and Milwaukee and here. We've had a great run here and with the Mavericks. So yeah, well, anyway, but thank you.
You're welcome, and God bless. And I hope that we can do another interview soon, because you've been a great guest, and I look forward to talking to you again soon, Coach. Thanks so much, and God bless to you and your family.
Well, and God bless you as well. Very, very nice.
Thank you. Take care, Coach. Thank you so much.